Welcome, everyone. The Friday afternoon series. Matt Wheeler is back. He was on a bike race last time, so we missed out on having him here. And I did note to those that are attending in person, twice a year, the time for the Friday afternoon series changes because those of us on this are in Arizona and it does not go on daylight savings time. So watch the times. If you're watching a recording, pay attention to the card that's on the Seeking Integrity website. I will update it but we don't want you to miss. We don't want you to be here an hour late or an hour early. So we want you to be here on time. But if you're watching a recording, guess what? We would rather have you join us live. So come check out the live webinars. Come join the conversation. Type your questions in. Without further ado, Matt, what do you have for us today?
That's a good question. I do think we left some questions unanswered last time. So I
Oh gosh, I forgot to pull those. Those it was so long ago, but you're right, we
no,
did.
it was like a month ago,
Yeah.
I think, and so we can jump into those as well.
Let me see if I can find them.
Here is um okay, so the topic. I
Yes.
I see so early on when I became a therapist, I started learning and trying to understand blame. And
Mm,
I think blame's a fascinating topic. And when I'm working with couples, I see it happen a lot. And I just kind of wanted to talk about and break down like a little bit more about blame, what it is, why it happens. Um, and most of the time, when I see blame happening, it's usually a person trying to explain to somebody else. Um, to the best of their ability, their understanding of what's happened, right? Now,
okay.
sometimes and oftentimes it can be this dismissal of accountability because I don't want to be accountable because it's too painful and scary to be accountable. But something I notice a lot is that sometimes people they self-blame. And it's a term that I've often used is like it's over accountability. So if I'm blaming somebody else, then I'm not being accountable enough. If I'm blaming myself, I'm actually being over accountable. And so learning how to find this space where sometimes I might describe something and it sounds like I'm blaming because I don't have the vocabulary to say something like, well, yesterday when we were talking, you raised your voice and I was impacted and I had a lot of fear come up. I didn't know how to handle my fear. And so I went and isolated and I didn't talk to you all evening because I'm still struggling to know how to regulate my fear and it's easier for me to just isolate, right? So that would be me describing a scenario without blaming and being accountable for the part that I'm accountable for. Now, if I were to say, well, that's not fair. Of course, I isolated. You yelled at me yesterday, right? That would be me potentially blaming. And if I was like, I would never isolate if you never yelled, right? Then again, I'm not being accountable potentially for all of the ownership that I have in my behavior. And if I'm putting it all on you, if you would never yell, I'd never isolate. Well, one, that's absurd, because the truth is that my issues with isolation, whether you yell or not, are things that I need to learn to work through. So we often are trying to describe impact. I made a poor choice, and I was impacted by your behavior even if I still have to completely own what I did when I was impacted. Because the truth is, and I've said this, I swear, to Tammy so many times. I remember being a kid going through the state forced our family to go through group therapy, and I remember my mom just drilling it into me. It doesn't matter um, how mean, awful, how terrible your spouse is. It does not give you an excuse to cheat on your spouse or to hurt somebody else or to, and so my mother would just drill into my brain. You are fully accountable for your behavior, no matter who and how you are impacted, right? And so that is something that has just stuck with me. So one of the things I've really tried to figure out how to do is how do I share with somebody my impact, that the ways in which they've impacted me? Because I do need to let people know you did this thing and it was hurtful. And then I made a bad choice. I took the hurt and I used it as justification and I went and did these things that now hurt you, right? When we pull apart blame and we start to understand we need healthy accountability everywhere, right? All of us need to learn to own that healthy accountability as well as um, learn to open up to the other person about the impact. And it's so critical because sometimes in this really messy process, we want to let our partner know, hey, do you remember when this happened? So, do you remember when you found out I was looking at pornography? You were so angry and you were screaming at me. That was really scary. You have every right to be upset. Everything I did to hide from you and injure you and break our relational agreement um, is obviously going to cause you pain. And the way you yelled at me was really painful. In fact, there was a comment last time that
I
I
found them.
did you
Oh, I
find
don't have
it?
the I don't know if I have the comments. Um,
Well, there I don't
I just emailed you
Oh, did
the
you?
this.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so
what
if you
that.
can pull that up, yeah. So
Let me actually I'm going to grab
I
this
think this is
comment.
probably part of it because it says this was a comment. I really appreciate your perspective, Matt. I do feel like it is more of a payback and not being bitter that my life was changed. I never met my real father and was very proud of my family. My husband ruined that, and it makes me so mad. So, is that what the one you were thinking of?
No, I was actually
Oh,
thinking the one that starts with, we can go to it. On behalf of the
oh,
betrayed,
yeah. We
we
are
are
not
not
abusing. Yeah,
abusing the betrayer when we vocalize our pain in a raw way as as long as we need. This is unexpected traumatic trauma behavior. Do you
this
agree
is
the betrayer?
expected.
Wait, this is expected trauma behavior.
Uh-huh.
Do you agree the betrayer should learn this? I'm not sure what this is because that was
That a partner is not abusing when we vocalize our pain in a raw way. Do you think the betraying
Okay.
partner
No,
should
that's
understand it? That makes
that's
sense?
good.
Okay.
Everyone should stop pointing fingers at the betrayed partners. We get it out and eventually calm down in our own way, in our own time, period. Okay. So I remember reading that, and I actually didn't bring this topic up as a result of that question. But as I started processing through this topic, it's hard because I don't it this is such an interesting space when so yes, a partner can have a trauma response and we need to be gentle and compassionate and caring when a trauma response occurs. It is, as somebody who has experienced trauma responses throughout my life, um, I know how absolutely difficult it is to manage all the pain and all that energy when a trauma response comes out. However, to say that abuse can't occur just because it's a trauma response, I think is um, not accurate. Now, because we even though a trauma response is happening, it's still a person still has to be accountable for the behavior that results. And so what's difficult is I don't like the idea when betrayed partners are told you're being abusive, you can't respond with your pain, right? To me, I'm like, no, we actually have to learn how to hold space for a partner who is having a trauma response and learn to be comfortable in their pain. Just because they're in pain does not mean um, that's abusive, right? Just because they're in pain and you're feeling that pain, it does not mean that's abuse. But
Correct.
if a betrayed partner pulls out a bat and starts hitting their partner with a bat and saying, "Well, that isn't fair. I blacked out. This is a trauma response." It's still, that would be abusive, right? You cannot hurt another individual physically just because you're having a trauma response. And so the idea that abuse can't occur when a trigger comes up for a betrayed partner, well, that's not accurate. But we also can't say your pain just because I'm struggling to manage your pain, uh, that you're being abusive, right? Like it's really difficult for us to learn how to be in each other's pain. Calling somebody names, and shaming somebody else, and usually intentionally, right? Like that is the definition of verbal abuse or emotional abuse. Now, again, I would hope that somebody is highly compassionate and doesn't and learns not to take it personal. If a betrayed partner is calling the individual who hurt them names and saying shameful things, I'm going to encourage that partner who is being called names to practice skills of holding space. And over time, your partner needs as much grace as possible as they learn to not be verbally offensive, if that makes sense. Um, and at the same time, right, like we have to be accountable that certain behavior, name calling, throwing things, those things aren't okay, right? So let's recognize impact. Let's understand what blame is. Let's practice accountability. Let's not be over accountable. Let's not blame ourselves. If I make excuses for the mistakes that I made and that allowed my partner to go make all these mistakes, you're in the wrong area. You're giving them plenty of excuses to potentially not be accountable moving forward. And so over accountability is not healthy. Under accountability isn't healthy. So, Tammy, with
Well,
that,
it's a lot because I'm thinking, and you were doing this earlier. It's kind of like the pulling thing, and this feels like pulling it apart because it is challenging. It's like
mhm,
a lot of it to me is, do you want to be the person on either side that is name calling, throwing things, raging out and I hear often from partners who are going like, this isn't who I am, and
oh,
like it,
totally.
it is crazy making. So, but I heard you say, like holding space for that.
Hmm.
So how do you hold space but not, but like there's a little bit of space, but if somebody's like, throwing things, if it's an unsafe environment, if somebody's being verbally abusive and things like that, I also
Yeah.
go, like I think it's fair for me to go, I want to hold space, but I'm going to come and check on you in a half an hour and see if we can have a discussion about this. I see how much pain you're in or something like that. So how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult because usually a partner who has been injured and who is having these trauma responses, this is at the beginning of any part of a recovery journey. And so
Yes.
the partner who's done all the injuring has low skill set. Like, and that's no excuse. It's a low skill set, which is part of the reason they've
Yeah.
been doing the unhealthy behaviors to begin with. And so
Yes.
So when I talk about like we need to give each other as much grace as we can without being over or under accountable, right? And so if so how to hold space, the for any of us, it's about building emotional tolerance. And building emotional tolerance is practicing staying present and practicing hearing that hurt without going into a shame place. And that takes time, that takes patience. It typically takes people lots of therapy. And
Yeah.
it's sometimes going to 12 step is wonderfully helpful because you're listening to other people talk about their shame, and we practice hearing them work through deep emotions, and that helps build our emotional tolerance. But building emotional tolerance with the people who are closest to us is the most difficult because,
and takes the longest
and
to
it
get
takes
to.
the,
Yeah,
yes,
and it feels so backwards. We should want to do this, but there's so much vulnerability. It's so it is like, yeah, we can practice on people who are not as close and vulnerable to in our relationships. So it's challenging, but I'm with you on the yeah, practice with groups, practice with 12 step, practice with other people. So yeah.
yeah, practice learning to be in emotions. As dumb as it might sound, if you struggle with sadness, watch sad movies and watch
Mm,
them over and over so that you can get used to being sad and feeling and watching other people's sadness, right? It might sound a little ridiculous, except it's not, right? You're trying to find ways of getting more and more comfortable with the discomfort. The more we get comfortable with the discomfort, the more we can stay in that present place. Now, the other thing you practice is, let's say somebody is mad at me, and one thing I might practice is this is about their pain. This
yes.
isn't about me. I can own the parts that are accurate for me, but their anger doesn't make me a bad person. Like I'm literally practicing fighting against the negative beliefs I've held my whole life when somebody's mad at me, so that over time I get used to, and I'm telling you, it is the strangest feeling. But when I have a client who comes in and is like, "Hey, I'm really bothered. I'm upset. I've been mad at you all week," and I
Oh wow.
actually I get excited.
Yeah,
It's
they're bringing a real thing to you.
well, yes. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're being so brave." Right? Like, and inside of me now, there is a part of me that's like, "Oh my gosh, did I say something stupid?" I've said plenty of dumb things throughout my career, right? Like, did I take the wrong direction? Was I insensitive, right? Like, I certainly have those thoughts and feelings, but when somebody approaches me and tells me that I screwed up or I didn't show up for them in the way that they needed, it's an opportunity for me to show up. It's an opportunity for me to show them that they matter to me. And I can be like, I am so glad you told me, and let's talk through this together. Let's figure this out. And in the future, I'm going to be paying attention to see if I can avoid hurting you again. And if I do, continue to tell me, let's do this together. Now, that has taken me so long. And the scariest person to do that with is my wife and my kids. And because when they come to me and they're like, husband or dad, you hurt my feelings. I'm like, oh no. These are the people I love the most. This is the hardest to do it with. And that's normal. So anyway, I kind of took over again,
Yeah,
Tammy.
no, I love that. And but somebody who comes and is vulnerable with you and you're excited to meet them in the space and work it out, that's also like what I was brave and I did that and we moved the relationship closer to each other. We moved it further, and you're doing it as a therapist. So, like I wonder what it would be like if I was willing to do this, with my partner. And, if I'm brave enough to do that and still have a safe space to come back to you and go like,
Yes.
I tried it at home and this is what happened, so
Yes. And so if we as a people learn to practice, so if you ever get hurt or offended by your therapist, or you have a friend of yours that hurts your feelings or frustrates you, practice going to them and saying, hey, I want to talk through something because I felt hurt by you. Now, I'm going to tell you, the people who don't practice this may not be very good at it, right? But if you practice having a voice, you get better and better. It gets easier and easier, even if the other person doesn't handle it well. I actually, um, I had a conversation with a supervisor of mine for the sex therapy supervision that I've been doing. Even though I'm now certified as a sex therapist, I still do supervision. And I reached out to my supervisor and I said, "Hey, there was this thing that happened a while back, a couple months ago, that was really tough." And like, it was so scary to
Mm,
do it. It was so scary for me. And I actually remember going, gosh, it's good for me to remember how scary this is because it must be so scary when clients do that with me. It must be so
yeah.
scary, right? When friends do that with me. And it was me being in that power down position with a supervisor, being afraid to have a tough conversation. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's an area where I have a shortcoming that I need to keep working on because it's just too easy for me to want to appease somebody in a position of power above me. And I'm like, okay, that was really good for me to realize. The supervisor ended up showing up fantastically. It was a little rough at first, ended up showing up fantastically. And I was like, I don't know, is fantastically a word? Anyway,
It is now.
it is that. And then but then it left me to sit in, wow, I need to keep practicing that. Like that's an area of weakness for me that I struggle with vulnerability around. So,
And that's it's really interesting. And I'm trying to get my words together. But I was thinking about, that in context of, I mean, there's so many, it's work relationships or whatever. And yes, when there's a power up, power down, I guess I think where I was thinking the most is I get lots of people who reach out and going, like this, I'm like multiple times a week. My therapist, I need a new therapist because my therapist can't help me anymore,
uh,
whatever. It's not a good whatever. And I often say, have you talked to your therapist about this? Have you talked, because like, have you asked about the treatment plan? Have you said, my goals have shifted? Have you had the conversations?
yeah.
And, because I think it's probably pretty typical for people to like ghost their therapist and just go find another one. And I'm like, this is a place where you have an opportunity to ask for your needs to be met. If you guys mutually agree that, like, and you've talked about it before, like if somebody outgrows what you're doing or needs something else, great, And
Right.
I think that that's a really healthy way to look at this is not a lifelong commitment, but it's also really important to see if that therapist was maybe just misreading or that was the initial goals that you had. And, now you feel like, well, I've completed those or my priorities have really shifted and now I need this. Can you help me? So I always encourage people to have the conversation, and I think it's good to practice that. But I'm hearing you too going like, and it's a really scary thing.
And it's scary. The thing that, as you were talking about that, I thought, even if like you were to approach someone like your therapist or even a friend and you approach them and they don't respond the way you want, and then you try again and they don't respond the way you want or are needing, not just wanting, but also
Right.
needing. And you approach them again. And let's say you end up firing your therapist because I keep trying to help them show up in this area and they don't seem to be able to. But now you've had multiple conversations, you've practiced confronting the issue, and then you're saying, "Hey, I think I need to move on." So then you move on to a different therapist, and that's something you say is that my last therapist, I was able to confront them and I didn't get my need met, but I've now grown in that skill.
Well, and it doesn't even have to be confrontational. Like if you're making a request of like, this is what
Right.
I'm looking to have, because confrontation sounds really scary, So,
Well,
but
I say confront them because again, we have to confront whatever the issue might be. They may not
okay.
even know that it's aware
Yeah.
that they're aware of that. The thing that I usually say is we have conflicts in every relationship. You can't
Yeah.
have a relationship with any type of intimacy without conflict being a normal thing. I might say that I had somebody say, "Oh, we need to avoid conflict." And I'm like, "Well, we need to avoid contention, right? Like we need to avoid,
True.
right, being mean or rude or contentious or purposely trying to hurt people and piss people off, but conflict is unavoidable. Like conflict is going to happen by nature of us living in the same space.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted to go back to the comment that you read too, because the comment was, we get it out and eventually calm down. And that is true on some, but there are people, and I've witnessed it, I've witnessed it in the last week or two where there are people that are years into this and are still name calling, very angry,
Right.
and that's just who they are, or no, that's who like they know that there are tools to use, but they're choosing to. So while I would like to give everyone the grace to say, yes, they eventually will, I think it also depends on if either side is willing to do the work in order to grow and move forward, and if the goal is we want to have a less contentious relationship, we want to grow together and find a path where we're doing this thing called life together.
Right. Well, yes, and that's the hard part. I have a ton of compassion, loads of compassion for a betrayed partner who is having trauma responses, who is making poor choices as a part of their trauma response. And even though that betrayed partner, like, I have tons of grace for that. And at the same time, we should be seeing de-escalation as we go. Now, that might be spread over a period of time, meaning you, it doesn't give an unlimited pass to be be angry forever. And I have to be careful because I don't love the idea of you need to hurry and forgive, right? Like the
Oh,
process,
absolutely not. But I'm
right?
talking 4 years or more
Well,
in,
right,
like,
like
more,
right. And there gets to be a spot where at what point, um, at what point does, um, gosh, how would I say this? I might say it like this. If regulation can't happen, right? I'm asking myself, is the relationship, and I hate to even use this term, but is the relationship toxic? Is it even repairable? Right? If there's no de-escalation of trauma responses over a period of time,
that's
and I'm
true.
and I'm talking deregulate or deregulation,
De-escalation.
de-escalation. I'm talking de-escalation, and I'm not saying this it needs to be a hurry. I understand how long that can take. And so it's that idea of over a length of time, let's say years, as you said, 4 years, if the same responses or similar responses are happening 4 years later, I'm seriously asking myself, hey, what needs to happen here? Is this relationship so toxic that neither one of you have actually found healing, that 4 years later you're nearly just as unstable? Like to me, I'm like, something's wrong. And I would sincerely look at what needs to happen for one of you or both of you to get the change that you need. Um,
And I don't want to go, and we got some questions that I do want to answer, but there are people that, I call it the negative two step. This is what you do, this is what I do. And they just want to keep doing that dance. And again, zero judgment,
right.
like I hear you and I are talking about what do we need? And I'm like, some people that is acceptable to them and they are okay with on both sides of the equation. And if that's working for the two of them, I like, I'm always hopeful there are not children being, in this mix with that, because that would be, more volatile and more toxic as
Oh,
well.
yeah, we make it so easy. It's tough because I have found that occasionally, and I think it's pretty rare, but I have found that occasionally, as I lean in and empathize with, usually when I lean in and empathize with a hurt partner, um, I watch over time as that de-escalation like continues to occur. And when I've found that I've been working with somebody, and I'll just make this up, but if I've found that after a year, like, there's a certain point at which I go, man, no amount of empathy is helping the de-escalation to occur. And oftentimes they start then getting angry with me. And I'm sitting and it can often occur when I'm now trying to hold empathy for both because that's the struggle of of a couples therapist is that truly we're there for the relationship and we're trying to empathize for both people here. And when I watch that, anytime I have empathy for the one who hurt them and they are now mad at me, I'm like, interesting. I
Mhm.
wonder if they are going to be able to de-escalate all that pain. And I'm asking myself, what needs to happen so that that pain can de-escalate? And um, because if it needs to be me joining with them to be angry at their partner, and that's the only way they de-escalate, then I've certainly I can tap into that it is anger. I have plenty of anger for how you were hurt. I can tap into that, and I don't disagree. Nothing made their behavior okay. And at the same time, it's this really interesting place of trying to figure out, can that de-escalation, can that regulation occur? I'm not one that can answer and point it out and say, yes, it can or can't. Something to watch for.
Well, and I also think, is that what you want? I mean, like I see there are people that are willing to stay. So can the de-escalation occur? Is
Well,
that a goal? Is
it
that a
well,
treatment goal?
and let's be honest, sometimes maybe it maybe it wouldn't be safe to not stay angry because
Hmm.
maybe the anger, and I'll even use a stronger word, the hate, toward the all of that intensity towards the partner who hurt them might be the safest strategy for that person to prevent future pain, right? So and again, I'm not saying it works, but it might actually be working, right? And so if I can, but I would argue that the same thing is true. I've seen where partners come in and they're like, "Oh, I forgive them. We can move
Yes.
past this. I'll forgive them." And I'm like, "Where's the anger? Where's the hurt?" Right? So I think it can swing the other direction when people are like, nope, I've forgiven them. Let's just move forward. And I'm like, we may have a big issue here that's the other side of that spectrum, right?
Yeah.
Like
I know. I agree. Yeah.
there's a really appropriate place for anger. There's a
Yeah.
really appropriate place for fear. All of those emotions are healthy. So let's not just, oh, they won't let go and they won't. Let's look at the other side. You let go way too quickly. You're moving past
Yeah.
this way too fast.
Yeah. Well, and I do think the challenge is, I see as people who are like constantly in that, escalated, like I honestly I have concerns about their, physical well-being, like
Oh,
that, the
totally.
levels of, cortisol and all of this stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I can't imagine, and life is short. So to me, it's like, how do we find joy? How do we find peace, even when someone else is not behaving, appropriately, whatever? How do we do the taking care of us that we need so that we can be okay physically, emotionally, all of those things. So we have a couple questions. I want to get to these. So um,
Sure.
I'm an, I'm an I am an addict in solid recovery, but we are dealing with the dual trauma loop. When my wife is triggered, I struggle to stay present. Not always out of shame, but because her distress triggers my own unresolved betrayal trauma from her past affair. How can we better co-regulate when both of us can't stay present? That's a common
It,
issue for whatever
it's,
reasons. And
oh, it's
I'm
such a
so
good,
glad you're asking that question.
it's such a good question. The tough part is it's hard to give a general answer. And so let me try. I'll give a general answer, but I'll fill in some possible gaps here. So let's say um, your wife gets triggered and you struggle to stay present, and you're recognizing that it's not always out of shame. So I hear you saying very clearly, it's easier to identify why I'm struggling to stay present if it's because of my shame, and if it is, that's practicing working through your shame. And you might try asking her, "Hey, when we aren't in a bad place, can I walk through my shame so that I can practice sharing it and owning that it's mine and that those aren't the messages you're trying to share with me, right? So you could try something like that. But if it's, let's say you've identified that it's not always out of shame, I might encourage you to figure out, okay, if I'm not in shame, another reason we struggle to stay present is that we're overwhelmed with emotion. And so let's say she's triggered and you're now feeling fear. You're going to try and practice um, being present while you're feeling fear. And that is not easy, right? It's not easy if you're feeling anger. It's not easy if you're feeling hurt. It's not easy if you're feeling sadness. It is so hard to stay present when our system is being overloaded by shame, by intense emotions. And keep in mind, confusion is an intense emotion. That's one of my favorite because confusion has so much room to be curious. Um, and so sometimes it's saying, it might be naming it in the moment, like, hey, I'm really glad you're bringing it up. I have a lot of confusion. Can we try and slow this down? And so that's another thing that I mean, it's probably been a while since we've talked about. When we learn to slow down the moment, it can be super helpful because I can say, hey, can we slow down a second? I'm noticing my confusion come up. I don't want it to take over. So, can I ask you some questions, or can you help me understand what's happening for you right now? Or what happened that brought this up for you? Now, one of your biggest mistakes in staying present is you might want to logically tell her like why she shouldn't feel the way she feels, even if it's coming from the most wonderful place, it's usually the worst thing to do. And so what I tell people is if my partner is triggered, I'm going as quickly as I can to validate their emotion, not validate their thinking. Because there's a huge difference. Let's say my partner comes to me and my partner's like, oh my gosh, I think you're cheating. I'm not going to say, oh my gosh, no wonder you're afraid. I want to validate that you think I'm cheating, right? If you're not cheating, then you're going to say, I want to validate your fear, right? I want to validate how much hurt you must be feeling. Whatever emotion you're feeling either makes sense to me because of what's happened, or it doesn't make sense and I need you to slow it down because I want it to make sense so that I can validate why you would be feeling that way, even if your logic isn't correct. So I see this all too often. A triggered partner walks in the room and might say, what are you hiding? And the first response, well, I think you're lying about something. And the first response is, I'm not lying. I'm not hiding. Stop. Nothing you say about the logic is going to help. It's, hey, if you think I'm hiding something, you're probably scared out of your mind. I've hidden lots of things from you in the past. Why don't you tell me what's going on and what you feel like I might be hiding? Because I don't want you to feel scared. I don't want you to think I'm hiding anything. You're so important to me that I want to help you feel whatever it is you're feeling and to know that you have every reason to feel that way, even if I don't understand it right now. Normally, I can't stay present because I can't understand what's happening. If you slow down, get curious, gain understanding, that's part of being present. And my guess is is what both of you need to learn to do in order to better co-regulate or reg because it's practicing my regulation. And if you can be scared that I'm hiding something or that I've triggered you with something in some way, and you know that I'm going to stay calm, then you have the ability to be messy and I'm going to stay calm. I can regulate both of us. We'll figure this out until you regulate. And then we both go, oh man, it sucks that we've gone through this. There's been so much pain. I'm so glad that you and I are doing the work to figure this out. So I hope that's helpful. Feel free to give me some more feedback. I'd be curious if,
I love to slow everything down. Dr. Eddie talks about that a lot, and yeah, it's because like you did the example of I walk in the room and go, you're hiding something, and so it's that immediate reaction rather than choosing to have an action. I love that you talked about like practicing. I like it would be really interesting to have a conversation of when you're not in the moment of like we get into these patterns where we're both dysregulated. I start to feel it in my gut, or I start to notice this. How about you? Where do you start? Like now you're having a conversation about like where are you starting to feel it? How quickly can you recognize that? Now you're having like it's a whole conversation. You're doing, you're engaging in what's going on. You know, I notice on your face, like there's an intensity in your face. Do you feel that? What do you see in me? Now you're talking about you have a common enemy. It's like you're not the enemies. You have a common enemy of this is what's going on. I wonder if, as soon as I start to feel it in my body, maybe I just say, just, like do it. I love the hand signals because guess what? I mean, this moving doesn't necessarily help it. Like, hey, yeah, I just need to slow down for a second.
yeah,
I'm starting to feel it because now you've talked about, I start to feel it. I'm starting to get
yeah.
dysregulated. You've had the conversation of when that happens, what do you think about? Could we try, like, just call me down? Could we do a box breathing together and see if we can, whatever? There's a whole bunch of them. We've talked about a
There's
zillion of them.
lots of different things. It's so funny because all of a sudden I had a memory that I haven't, I mean, I would guess at least 5 years ago, I was running a men's only group. And
Okay.
I remember one time, I don't remember what even kind of spurred it. So I'm trained in psychodrama, and so that's something that we would do as part of the group. But one of the guys had brought up like this difficulty dealing with his wife being triggered. And the guys were talking about it enough that I remember I said, "Hey guys, why don't we practice?" And they're like,
Mhm.
"What?" And I said, "I want you to pick someone in the room who can act like your wife, and I want you to show them what that looks and feels like to you, even if um it's exaggerated, right? Because you want to see if we can bring that response up." And now, so they would do it. And I mean, we spent a couple of months at the start of every group just doing these exercises
Mm.
because it was something that they were like, we want practice, we want to be able to show up better for our spouse who's upset. And it was a way to build tolerance and practice also while knowing that you're in a safe room. And it might sound terrifying, but you might say to your spouse, like, hey, I know we're in a good place right now, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to practice being upset with me about something. But if we do this together, then I can practice regulating. Now, it might sound funny, but like only do that if you guys feel safe enough together to do it. But the idea is let's do this together so I can practice showing up the way you need. Now, notice if I say, "Hey, why don't you tell me that you're upset about this thing?" And let me try to respond. And then I want to ask you, how was that response? Is this what you're needing from me? Right? And it might be just a very simple exercise we practice on a regular basis. And if I'm like, oh, dang it, that's right. You need me to say this, right? But if we do it together, we slow it down, only do that when we're in a stable place. But the idea that I think is interesting is that couples will often tell me, well, things are good. We don't want to talk about anything that,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? And I'm like, that's the best time to try. The best
Yes.
time to have difficult conversations is when you're feeling secure.
Yes. Well,
Anyway,
I've had people, we talk about you doing timeouts and things like that. Well, we tried it and it didn't work. And I was like, well, how, and I always say, practice. This is like, we're going to practice and it's going to feel really awkward. But if you're practicing, then you know what to do. If you are waiting till the moment when everything's, your thinking part of your brain is offline now, you're never going to remember it. And things are, you can't shift anything when things are all elevated. So, but I crack up, they go, yeah, yeah, we tried it once and it didn't work, and it's like throwing in the towel. And I'm like, well,
Right.
that's why it was practicing. And I'm like,
Right.
commit to practicing it 10, 12 times. I love that you're saying these guys did it, for months at the beginning of the thing
Oh,
because they were wanting to do something that was going to be different and they knew they didn't have the skills.
yeah. And it's hard. Again, it's such a scary thing to do. And I've found that most of the time when I have people in treatment, especially if they've been in treatment for any length of time, right? Like if I have somebody that's in their first couple of sessions, they might be just trying to show up so that they can say they
Yeah.
tried.
Yeah.
When I get people in any length of time, I frequently hear, please, I really want to show up for my partner better. It's so hard for me. And so, like, everybody seems to long to want to learn how to do this, and it really does take practice. And I mean, it's like, hey, those of you who learned to ride a bike, how many times did you have to practice? And usually that first time you're not getting it. So
Well, and these skills, start to be empathy. Like I'm able to hold a space for you. And every partner is like, well, he doesn't have any empathy. I'm using gender, but yeah, and I'm like, yeah, it's a skill that has
that,
to be learned.
yep.
And we completely suck at this. We have no skill for it. And so the more we practice it,
And
we
it's
can
not
gain.
fair.
It's never
It's
none
not
of
fair
this is
because
fair.
you deserve empathy, and
And that's why you have
unfortunately,
your other trade partners and
and
your
he
tribe of people
and
that
his
can.
skill is really tough on this. Yeah.
Okay, so then the next one is betrayed spouse here. What about situations when the betrayed partner's anger is provoked?
So one, it's not okay to provoke, like to intentionally try to make somebody else angry. Um, so the truth is, it's super unfair that your anger is provoked, and that's not okay. Now, at the same time, w- it the only accountability. So, one, if somebody's intentionally trying to provoke anger, as a partner, I'm going to try to build up a tolerance and say, hey, I'm not going to respond right now. This is one of those moments where it feels like you're trying to provoke my anger. I'm not going to respond, but if you'd like to talk about why you might be trying to provoke my anger, I'm willing to have that conversation, right? That would be me holding a boundary that I'm not going to react to you because this doesn't feel okay. And at the same time, I am willing to talk about why it feels like you're provoking me. That doesn't feel good. I'm not safe enough to get vulnerable with you if you're going to provoke me. Now, I think this question was asked earlier when I said we have to be accountable for our trauma responses. Like ultimately over time, we are accountable if we have a trauma response. Uh the dumb example I give all the time is when my daughter was 9 months old and I'm asleep and she sticks her finger in my mouth because she's a baby and I bite it. I bit so hard and immediately she is screaming. Obviously, it's the middle of the night. My wife wakes up. What's going on? And I always tell that story. I have so much compassion for people who nurse and their baby's sleeping in bed, even though that's apparently pretty dangerous because people can roll over and whatever. But the idea is in that moment, I bite her. She's screaming so loud. And my wife's like, what is going on? And I'm like, as calmly as I could, I bit her. And she's like, "You what?" And I'm like, "I bit her." And she's like, "Why?" And I was like, "She stuck her finger in my mouth." And she's like, "So?" And I'm like, and I couldn't explain it. I knew what I did was wrong. I couldn't help myself. And that started probably forever years worth of me practicing not having that trauma response. It absolutely was a trauma response. I I have a sexual abuse history. I had lots of things happen to me while I was asleep, and that was just good-natured fun from siblings who just thought it was fun to torture the youngest child. And I mean, I could get into my trauma. It doesn't really matter because when it comes down to it, it was absolutely a trauma response. I had to own my behavior. It wasn't okay. And over time, I had to practice not injuring my daughter or my kids in general. Now, the truth is, my kids over the years, they called me the "Don't wake the daddy monster" because
Oh, wow.
they would wake me up and I would oh, oh, and I
Oh,
had to like figure out how to change that energy. And and so then I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, guys, I am so sorry for yelling.
yeah.
This is not your fault." And I've asked them over the years, "Hey, tell me what that was like." And they've told me, like, we thought it was weird, but we didn't take it personal. Like, you
Oh,
didn't,
that's great. Yeah.
yes. Like,
Yeah.
and I was like, oh, thank heavens, because that has
Yeah.
taken me so long that even recently, they'll tell me, even now, they'll go to wake me up and they feel bad about it because I will
Yeah.
now just like jerk really
Oh,
bad.
wow.
And then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's taken a long time. And some of those responses, even though I've done really good EMDR work, like some of those responses are instinctual. And I've had to practice learning to de-escalate those. And if, let's say, I'm in a relationship where my wife thinks it's funny and she wants to provoke that trauma response, I would probably over time have to consider, is that a relationship I want to be in? Like, and that may sound terrible that I say that, but the truth is, my wife over time has become very gentle and understanding of my trauma responses, and at the same time, held me accountable that it's not okay if my trauma responses hurt our children or anybody else, right? Like, and the truth, and she's not wrong. I have to take accountability. If one of my trauma responses was to drink alcohol, because I'm trying to figure out how to work through the pain, I am accountable for that. So it's a delicate situation where I have tons of compassion, and at the same time, if somebody's provoking me and over time is not being compassionate about my trauma response, I'm asking myself, does this relationship work? Because my trauma, if you're going to use that against me, woo, we got problems. So I'm curious, Tammy, what comes up as
Yeah,
I,
no, I was thinking because, and I've shared this before, but like I had an anger response that I used to call it my white hot rage.
Mhm.
Used to because I did my EMDR, I did my work, and I've not had to, and it was provoked, but um, I cannot remember one incident where somebody intentionally provoked it. It was my abandonment wound. I finally figured that all out. Thank you, Troy Love. That it
I
was
was gonna say thank
yeah,
you, Troy
yeah, no,
Love.
I know, because but I was just like I wouldn't even know. It would just all of a sudden, and like I
Oh,
could
totally.
feel like the who was going to
Oh
come,
yeah.
and and I would just like one time, and I've shared this too. I used to ride motorcycles, and I had my full face helmet on, and somebody came up, to me, and it was this. I remember the whole incident, and I just shook my head, and she turned and walked away, and I was like, "Good, good, good, good life choice for you." I needed to work on calming down, and I could, but that would happen so instantly, and I
Yeah.
knew I was responsible for my actions, and so if I could have flamed out all of the relationships. Anybody who was in my path was going to get torched. And so I learned to shut my mouth and work
And
on calming
um,
myself down.
and that is so hard, and it's not fair, right? Like the truth is, I had every reason in the world to tell my wife in that moment my trauma response, it's not my fault. Like as I learned to, and I knew in the moment what it was all about, but I didn't, I had to sit there and go, I bit my daughter. Like it that
Yeah.
I hurt her. And
Yeah.
I have to figure that out. I remember another time, oddly enough, I was taking a guitar lesson and I had a trauma response that was
Mm.
so intense. And my daughter noticed at this point, she's 12 and she's actually studying to be a therapist now, which is kind of funny. But she was like, Dad, are you okay? I'm fine, sweetheart. Are you okay? I'm
Mm.
fine, sweetheart. And we're driving home. Dad, you're not okay. And I said, sweetheart, I'm having a trauma response. You cannot ask me about this. I have to get home. I will not be able to drive. Please don't ask me about this. I can't talk about this, right? Like, and I'm doing everything I can not to completely lose it. And when I got home, I let my wife know, and she was able to show up for me, and I worked through it, and it was really good. But gosh, it is so overwhelmingly powerful. And in that moment, I'm doing everything I can just to survive.
Yes.
Right?
And not lash out. Like I always think I'd be the flamethrower. Like the earth would be scorched if I let that all go. The rage was that extreme. It was horrible. I hated it.
Oh,
And I somehow managed, like I knew I just needed to keep my mouth shut and not talk to anybody, because if anybody said anything to me, they couldn't have helped me in that moment unless I needed, if somebody was a trained therapist right about then, but they weren't. But like I
right.
just needed to calm down
Yeah.
and recognize that nobody did anything intentional,
Yeah.
so
But
whew, it was hard.
what I love about this question is the truth is if you have a partner who's intentionally
Yes.
provoking, again, look, we can try and explore that. They need to learn to change that. And if
Yeah.
if I have a partner who is not going to change that and they're intentionally trying to trigger my trauma, I'm asking myself, how long can I do this?
Yeah. And what is the, like we have a, should I say or should I go, and there's a 10
Right.
questions, sir. You kind of a journaling about what is the good in the like does the, does this really, does this relationship make sense? Am I getting, ultimately what I'm going to need? Do I see a future with this person?
Mhm.
All of those things can be useful. So we are out
Absolutely.
of time. So Matt will be back. Reminder, the time will change, for March because there's a daylight savings time. So this will be at 2:30 Pacific time after daylight savings time, both Matt's and Debbie's. And so watch the schedule. And so I thank you so much. This was a great topic. Thanks
Yeah.
everyone for the questions, and
Appreciate
come
it.
back and see us next time. Bye everyone.
Bye.